The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondel.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Stage Door Show. This is Dave Hondel. Tonight, my guest you've seen is Santo in the hit CBS series Kane. He was also Vinnie Malone in Tyler Perry's The Haves and the Have-Nots, and was Vasquez in The Hangover Part 3, among many other projects. His credit list is endless, and on that list is also director, producer, and writer, so we're honored to have him on the show tonight. So please welcome Mr. Oscar Torre. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this interview because I really enjoyed your work over the years. I was a fan of Kane, the TV show on CBS.
Really?
And absolutely. And Hangover 3 and just, all the shows that you were in, and the TV shows, movies. But I want to start with this because I knew you grew up in Miami. You've been in a lot of interviews talking about growing up in Miami.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know this, I know you worked as a therapist. You wanted to be a psychologist, I understand. Is that true?
That is true. That is true. I worked as a therapist, substance abuse counselor at the Miami Mental Health Center.
Okay.
And I did that for about 6 years and I started acting around the same time as well.
Okay. Well, and the reason I asked that question is because I know that, in that field, in the psychology field, I think you see many people, and you can see, through the lens and through the eyes of many people that you meet, that you see, and that you counsel. So did that help you prepare for some of these roles that you play on TV and movies? I mean, did that help with the psychology of it, I guess, getting into somebody's head like that?
100%. 100%. I always say that's the best acting school I ever went to.
Yeah.
Because it's real life. And it kept me away from playing stereotypes.
Right.
Very early on, because I saw people more than what you first see when they come in through the door. And as a therapist, you get into their backgrounds and where they came from and how did this issue that brought you here started. And you start seeing that people are more than, in the case, I worked with a lot of people from the criminal system. They were given the option of getting treatment or going to prison.
Sure. And
they chose treatment, or some got out early and they went to treatment as part of their release program or whatever. And so I saw them more than the crime. Usually in a TV show, you see these characters and they commit the crime. And I got to know them as a person. And I think that's something that I brought to every role I've played. Even some, are very one-dimensional at times. And I've been able to add layers to that one-dimensional character. And on occasions, has gotten me more episodes.
Yeah. And you also had a method, I understand, when getting ready for a role, that you would actually dress a certain way and try to take that persona and going out in public to see what the reaction was, which I think is brilliant, by the way. So, talk about some of that. And then did that help you prepare? Because you were getting honest reactions from people, I would imagine.
Well, totally. I discovered that early on. And it was an acting class in Miami. The teacher is Teresa Maria Rojas, very well-known teacher in Miami. And she had this, I had started acting, had been acting about a year, gone to classes. And it wasn't clicking. It wasn't clicking for me. It wasn't like, I tend to be shy. I was having issues with all these exercises. And then in that semester, in that class, she came up with this exercise that she said, I want you to bring a character and we could write the material for ourselves. Choose a character. And I want you to bring that character in through the door. And the moment you walk in through the door, for the next 3 hours, you're that character. When people address you, I want you to respond as a character. I only want you to have character thoughts. Don't break character for the next 3 hours. And for me, the moment I chose a character, and I chose somebody who I met at the mental health center. that I was working at the hospital that I was working. Character who's schizophrenic. I chose that character, and once I started writing his background story, and I didn't know this guy well, funny enough, but I had seen him around the hospital. I had dealt with him once. I started writing his background story. Why would he say what he says? What are his delusions? Why are these his delusions as opposed to another type of delusion? And I started creating that. And then I came in character. I dressed as the character, and I walked in through that door. It was like everything clicked for me.
Yeah.
Everything. For that next 3 hours, I was that character. And that gave me personally, it might not work for anybody else, gave me a way of working, a way in the characters that I play, of if I inhabit these characters and I take them out to the street and not do anything crazy, just take them out to the street, regardless of who I'm playing, the head of the mob. As I was on the House and I Have Nots, I was the head of the mob.
Yep.
So I would dress in a suit. I would go to a nice Italian restaurant, right? I would walk in character. I wasn't doing anything crazy because in real life, people don't do most of the time crazy things like that.
Right. Yeah.
But I was walking as this person with status, and I would order a table. And, I was expected to get a good table. Just in my attitude, I wasn't doing it. And that gave me, and people react to that. So I would go to these restaurants. When I was playing Vinnie Malone, I would go to these restaurants, and they would react as if, well, at least that's how I interpreted this, as if I'm somebody important who they should sit in a good table.
Right. Yeah.
And it was so interesting to see how different characters, or when I did the schizophrenic guy, that I would dress up as the character, and I would go out into the street. And I remember going I went into some, like a coffee shop or something like that. And I was standing in line as the character. I was standing in line. I was just like, I would wander off and whatever. And the manager had me skip the line. Because he wanted to get me out of there.
Yeah. Oh, I got you.
He wanted to get me out of there. Pulled up the dollars, and I was counting them, and I was giving him the change and stuff like that. And the guy just took it and gave me my drink and like, thank you.
It's like, get out.
And you start getting to see how the world reacts to your character.
Right. Right.
And at the same time, how you react to the world.
Yeah.
So that became a way for me to work.
Yeah.
And I try to do it as much as possible.
Well, talk about CBS too when you're on Kane, because I understand the audition was very interesting because you sent them a DVD of your acting. So they gave you an audition, but you came in as that character, just somebody from Cuba, like you just got here last week, and they had no idea, and they cast you immediately. And I understand that Jimmy Smits didn't even realize that you were not that person. That just came, from Cuba, until you were in a car scene with him and in between takes. Is that right?
Yeah. It wasn't immediately. That's the only thing. I went in, I sent a tape for an audition. Then they brought me in for the role of that. Actually, I sent the tape. They didn't ask for the tape, by the way. They weren't seeing me. I didn't have any LA credits.
Okay.
I had my Miami credits.
Sure.
Which to people in LA, when you get to LA, unless the major thing, and now it might be a little different with Netflix and stuff like that. That's more international.
Yeah.
But back then, it was unless you had LA credits and New York, but even New York there wasn't much happening in New York at the time.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing Broadway or theater. They don't look at your credits, and my credits were all Miami credits. And a movie that I had done in Spanish that had not come out yet. That later on, it came on when I was doing Kane. It came out when I was doing Kane, and the movie was pretty big, called Ladrón que roba ladrón. But that credit didn't. It was a Spanish credit for them.
Sure.
So which actually that Spanish credit probably added to what they thought of me, because it was a Spanish credit.
Sure.
So what I did was, man, I knew this character. I had met this guy. The guy was a guy who had just arrived from Cuba, and he was really dangerous. But at the same time, I knew these people growing up in Miami.
Yeah.
And the thing that I thought that I added to this character was humor.
Yeah.
And that there's a certain thing about these characters that a lot of people miss, unless they're from that area and they know these characters. They always seem to have status. Doesn't matter if you're the guy working at the back of the kitchen, the lowest status of the business.
Right.
He still walks around like he might own the place one day.
Confidence. Yeah.
There's a certain confidence.
Right.
And maybe it's from where you come from, what you went through, to get to here. That you're
chip on the shoulder. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're very respectful when you're, and so I brought that to the table. So when I walked in the audition, I'm gonna give you a long answer. When I walked into the audition, I came in. I said, I'm going to come in as a character. I don't want to break character. And I don't always recommend that, but for me, on that specific audition, it was too big. Everybody was there. There was, Network was there. Jimmy Smits was there. Cynthia Cedar, as showrunner, but Jonathan Prince was there. All these people that I would get nervous, and it was my first big break in LA. Right. I hadn't done anything, so I'm like, I'm gonna walk in as this character. I'm gonna talk to everybody as this character. I'm not gonna break the accent. So that's what I did. And I went in. I shook Jimmy Smith's hand. I said hi to everybody. Hello, everybody. Room full of people.
Yeah.
Hello. That if I would have gone as Oscar, I would have been nervous.
Sure.
But since I was Santo, Santo's not nervous. This is like I've been in prison. This is
even worse situations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like Scarface says, which is a great line. The Tony Montana character. There's nothing you can do to me that hasn't been done already.
Exactly.
And that is a very real line.
Yeah.
So that mentality, I went in. I said hi to everybody. I told a little story at the beginning. That you don't do any of that stuff in an audition. They want you in and out of the room. Be nice. Be personable. Don't shake people's hands. Those are all.
It was charming to them a little bit.
Exactly.
Right,
I went
they don't
in
see that.
as a person who you could hire.
Yeah. Right.
Really, who might do whatever job you need me to do.
Right.
And I went in with that attitude of buenos dias, hello, everybody. Hey, you meet mates. Like I recognize. Hey, you meet mates. I shook his hand. I go, oh, funny. They go, you have any questions? I go, no, I don't have any questions. But funny because my character in the story is from Cuba, Matanza, Cuba. It's a certain city in Cuba.
Sure.
Matanza, Cuba. And qué casualidad that I went to Spain, I broke Spanish and back to him. My dad had a funeral home in Cuba.
Yeah.
The biggest funeral home in Matanzas. Which is funny when your character's playing a killer. Dad owned the funeral.
Funeral home, yeah.
And they laughed and stuff like that. And they go, okay, whenever you're ready. Boom. When I went into the audition, I went into the scene and I started improvising. Right out the bat, I improvised the beginning of the scene because it says that the scene is Santo is caught stealing things from Jimmy Smith's company. Yeah, I worked there, but I was stealing
right.
I was stealing toilet paper and stuff to survive.
Yeah. Small stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but it says stealing things. So I made it that I was toilet paper towels.
Yeah.
And a bottle of wine.
Right.
I was very specific of what I stole in my mind.
Right.
So right away when Jimmy Smith sees me, the character sees me, and says, what is that? I said, no, I don't want you to think. These are gifts that people at the office gave me. Toilet paper, things like that,
Yeah.
And that wasn't in the script.
Right.
And then the reader, which is Jonathan Prince, the showrunner, which I had no idea he was a showrunner.
Yeah.
Was reading with me because Jonathan used to be an actor.
Yeah.
Says the first line, and then I stayed in character.
Right.
Except I have a line in the audition that says I do. Finally, he confronts me for stealing.
Right.
And he asked me about the tattoo that I have in my hand, character, which I did draw.
Right.
I didn't draw a tattoo in my hand, but I had fake tattoos in my hand. They didn't know we're fake.
That's amazing.
And he asked me, he asked me, what is it that you did in Cuba? Because he recognized the tattoo from being a killer. And I said, I do what I got to do for my family. Yeah. That's the line. That's written.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I added, I said it. I do what I got to. I said it. Nobody knows what I said it means. Unless you're from the streets in Cuba or from Miami. You say that to anybody else. You say it to a Mexican. You say it to, they'll look at it. You're like, what?
Yeah. What did you just say? Yeah.
But as luck may have it, Cynthia Cedre, who wrote the pilot and the showrunner, she's from Miami originally.
She knew.
She knew what it meant. Nobody there knew what it meant.
Wow.
So she knew. She got the sense that I had to be either the real thing or very familiar with the real thing when I brought a word that I think is from Afro-Cuban.
Yeah.
I said it. And
Right.
then when the audition was over, she stood up and she goes, I haven't heard that word in 20 years.
Wow.
But
She
she's been living out
remembered.
here for the
Wow.
cut to a month later. I was pinned for the role, meaning
Yeah.
I was put on hold,
Sure.
but I hadn't gotten the role, and it took close to a month.
Oh, okay.
And in a month, I think CBS wanted them to look at other people and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
But it was the kind of thing, for what I understand, the kind of thing that I went in the room and they're like, oh, that's that guy was an actor. That's
That's the guy.
character.
Yeah.
So when they started, so what I heard was that they told CBS, because CBS had to give the okay on casting, but I had no real credits.
Right.
So what they told CBS is that you don't see any real credits with me. This is what I heard, that you don't see any real credits with me because I'm from Cuba. That I'm an actor from Cuba, that my credits are in Cuba.
Right.
So that's not going to show up on IMDb or anything like that, especially back then.
Right.
So that's what got me the role. And then I'm doing the pilot, and I'm sitting in the scene waiting. They're rigging the car. It's a driving scene. And I'm driving Jimmy because I'm his right hand guy, and I drive him around and stuff, and I do all the killing as well. And he asked me, he goes, "I said it." He calls me "I said it." To this day, he'll still call me "I said it." He goes, "I said it." So did you come from Cuba on a boat, on a raft, or you came on a plane? And I'm like, and I had totally forgot that they didn't know. I'm like, no, I was born in Miami. I've never been to Cuba.
Did he freak out?
He started laughing. And that's when he told me, no, we all thought they were, that you recently got here.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I love that story.
So to this day, whenever I can, I come in as,
hey, why not?
It's another thing that added to the, hey, it works. It works for me.
100%, man. That's 100%. That's great. And I want to ask you about this too, because, some of the roles that you play are, quote unquote bad guys, but they have redeeming qualities. They're human, and they have a soft side to them that people don't, normally see in bad guys. And so it's almost like you root for your character, to succeed, even though you're quote unquote a bad guy. So talk about there's a fine line, I believe, when playing characters like that. You have to have a backstory that, this person, the reason why they're doing these things, like you said, it's either for the family or it's for self-preservation. It's not always to just be a bad guy. I mean, so talk about that, and how do you strike that balance between being a bad guy but also having redeeming qualities?
Like I said earlier, first of all, I never see my character as a bad guy.
Yeah.
Very few characters have I played that I go, this guy is a bad. I played a character in a short film with a friend of mine, Ernesto Sandoval, terrific director, that I was playing the devil. So that's probably as close to a bad guy.
Yeah.
As I come to play in my head.
Sure.
Besides that, I always find, and often it's not in the script, because it's a lot of times it's not their job to add these layers to the character. You're there to serve a purpose in the story.
Sure.
But for me, to make the character interesting for me to play, for me to like this guy, I have to like my characters, understand my characters, for me to play them. I never think of them as a bad guy. I think of them as, I wouldn't want to meet them in real life.
Sure.
But I think of them as they have to have a want that's big enough, powerful enough for them to do what they're doing right now in the story.
Sure.
And once you find that want, that reason for why you're doing this, it's either kidnapping somebody or robbing a bank or, being the head of the mafia. Once you find that want, what is it that you're protecting? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And nobody knows. You're not showing the world that this is what you really want to accomplish.
Right.
Once you have that want, the audience, I think, picks up on it. at a different level, even if it's not in the script, even if it's not. A lot of times they've let me, once I start playing, they've let me add little things to it that gives the audience a hint of like there's more to this person.
Right.
Even if we don't know what it is, there's more to this person.
Goes much
And
deeper
it might
than
be
what
that
they
I'm,
see. Yeah.
and it's a lot of times in the choices that you play, I might talk to a guy in a scene like I'm gonna kill him, but then I turn to a waitress and I'm very polite
Sure.
in the way I order my drink, or bartender, the way I order my drink. And that gives like, ooh, that's interesting,
Right.
He didn't talk to the waitress the same way he talked to the guy he wants to kill. It's like it gives layers to get to what I was saying. It gives layers, and the audience gets to feel, well, there's more to this character. I see the humanness of this character,
Yeah.
the humanity of this character in many ways. And I try to find for me the strongest choice. Those who are actors understand what I'm saying. The strongest choice, life and death choices.
Yeah.
That I can make. If I don't succeed in fill in the blank, a loved one's going to die. I'm not going to be able to get them, keep paying for the medical treatment that they need to survive. That's not in the script. That'll never be in the script. The audience doesn't know. The writers don't care to write that in the script.
Yeah.
But it gives me the purpose why I'm able to be the way I am.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
and
I think some people think when they watch that they can put themselves in a situation. What would I do if I were in a situation like that? Would I do the same thing?
100%.
So I think everybody has that ability to kind of look deep into a character and think, yeah, is this a bad guy? Maybe not. Maybe this is something that he's protecting his family, or he's willing to take the fall for his entire family to make sure they're safe, whatever that might be. But I think you're right. That's well said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing I want to ask you, and this is something that has been recent, obviously, with the strike that just ended several months ago, but it lasted for a while. And one of the things I thought about during that strike was with social media and with streaming platforms and everything that people have available to them as an actor, director, producer, whatever the case is. Do you think that the shift has kind of changed and it's more of a level playing field now, where the studios who had the power at one point, but do you think that actors and people that are having more of an ability to put their work out for millions to see, and some people really get famous off of YouTube or whatever from their work that they do? Do you think that there's been a shift over the past several years to more of a where the power becomes more in the actor's hands? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes and no, in my opinion. Yes and no.
Yeah.
Because the key word there that you said, power.
Right.
I think the studios still have the power.
Yeah.
They have the power. They have the money. Again, to quote Scarface, with money comes power.
True.
They have the money. What the actors or creatives, because a lot of them are not actors, creatives have right now is available to them. And that's what I tell young people who are trying to get in the business is like, hey, you have tools right now that I didn't have when I started.
Absolutely.
And you have the internet that's, that everybody sees it. You have Instagram, you have Twitter, you have TikTok.
We didn't even have these back then. Everybody carries it around. That, they can watch it as they walk, Not
only that, that's an amazing tool as an act. I have a feeling that future actors are going to be a lot more comfortable in front of a camera than my generation or any generation before mine was, because these little kids that have no ambition of being an actor are constantly doing TikTok videos. They're seeing themselves.
Absolutely.
They're getting a sense of what works, what's natural, what I don't like, what I like. It takes a lot of years for actors to find this out. Of course, there's a creativity and all that of taking somebody else's lines and making them your own and creating a real person out of paper that we do as actors.
Right.
But going back to your question, yes, that we have the ability to put our work out there and show and shoot little movies and edit them, and some of them are incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Incredible with all these tools that you have on a phone. Incredible. So you have that. But the power, unless you're one of these people that's, influencer or something that's monetizing
Right.
on YouTube, then you have power. Yeah, those who are making, a great amount of money putting content out there, that's a whole different ball game.
Sure.
But the normal person that gets into this industry as an actor and wants to be part of, films and television and all that, no, it's not easier. It's not easier, and it's slower. So as a result of the strike that took so long, it's been slow to get back to normal.
Right.
And who knows what normal will be and is.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because there's a lot less, even TV shows that used to run 23 episodes, then they cut down to 13, and now you see them 8 and 6.
Yeah.
So as an actor, that makes it a lot harder to make a living.
Right.
Because suddenly you went from doing 23 episodes a few years ago to then 13 to now 6 episodes or 8.
Yeah.
And unless you're the lead that's in every episode, you're not in 6 or 8 episodes.
Right.
So if you're a recurring guest star, you might be in 2 instead of 9. So I don't know how to answer that honestly.
Yeah.
Because we still don't have the final result of what the industry's going to look like once it gets back to normal, if it ever has a normal or the new normal.
That's true.
After the strike.
Yeah. No, you're right. Absolutely. That's also well said. But, another thing is, as an actor, but you also do producing and directing and writing, so getting into those other disciplines after being an actor, do you see acting now through a different lens when you're in the front of the camera, knowing what happens behind the camera now? Does that help you?
It does. It does. Even if I may not be thinking about it, it does. I mean, as the director, and I would say that primarily I'm a director.
Yeah.
Who writes.
Sure.
But I'm more of a director who writes than a writer who directs. Totally, when you're on set, you're seeing everything that's happening. When I was just acting, I was like learning. I was learning. I was always like paying attention to what's going on and what everybody else was doing. But a lot of things I wasn't picking up on because I didn't know. I hadn't been in that side of the camera. But now being a director and having produced as well, I see why the director might be doing this or setting up a certain way or doing something because he's behind, so he needs to speed up and so he might. So it also changes a lot of times, especially when I'm working with a director that knows I direct.
Yeah.
Sometimes his notes are a little different.
Yeah, because you understand. Yeah, you understand.
Yeah, he'll tell me exactly. He'll tell me really quick why he's doing what he's doing.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to giving me a note but not telling me because he doesn't know that I'm going to understand it. He doesn't have time to start explaining.
Yeah.
So I think that changes, but yeah, I'm aware of what's going on. I'm paying attention to what lens they're using. Okay, just from here, I know how tight they're going to be on me or how wide the shot's going to be. So that changes how I'm going to play the scene. If it's a wide shot, it shows more of my physicality. If they're really tight, and they usually tell you if it's a close up, they're going to tell you we're going in for the close up. But now I know I got to be still. But all these little things I pick up on.
Right.
And the things that actors are not, that I give notes a lot of times, even to veteran actors, like, hey, find your light. Right. And they're moving around, and I'm like, find your light because I'm not seeing you when you're not in your light. Well, that's the best. So as an actor, one of the things I now immediately do is I want to know what lens they're using. How much space do I have?
Right.
Moving the scene, and then I find my light.
Yeah.
Like I just did right now. I'm like, hey, I'm a little darker.
Exactly.
That's my light right there.
Exactly. So that's why a lot of actors wouldn't understand that, but though, I mean, working with DPs and working with, other directors, I mean, that's something that would probably come natural to you now. That's why I asked that question, because I think getting into producing and directing, I think does help you become a better actor, or at least think about things like that. For our listeners out there that are that are actors out there, this is good advice that Oscar's given you.
And you might have a great idea. You might have a great idea. and now I understand. You might have a great idea, but before I wasn't really thinking about it. You might have a great idea for the character to do. Hey, what about if I do this? And then the director tells you, that's a good idea, but no, let's not do that. And you're
Right.
like, and you might think, huh, maybe he didn't like my idea, maybe he had, but once you're directing, you realize, no, that's another setup.
Right.
He's behind on time.
Sure.
And that's the whole different setup. He needs to move that camera. He needs to move all the lights. He needs to
Yeah.
do what the idea that so a lot of times I'll think about the note and I'm like, okay, that idea, how can I make it work right here?
Right.
Because you're looking at me right here. My idea takes me over here.
Yep. It's got to all be
Yeah.
moved.
He
Yeah.
needs to move the camera
Right.
and the lights and everything. And he's behind on schedule.
Right.
So little things like that, I think has changed some of the things I think.
Yeah.
And I will still have that conversation with the director, especially, especially if I'm one of the leads in a show in the movie, or, I have a good sized role.
Right.
If you have a couple lines, don't bother the director
Yeah.
in the most part with this great idea that your character's just there to,
Right.
serve the story
Serve the
in
story. Right.
moving it along,
Support it.
not
Yeah, for
about
sure.
you,
Yeah.
and that's hard for actors who are creative to
Yeah.
to realize, because I still, when I played those characters and I only had a couple of lines, I would still do all this homework.
Right.
Doesn't mean that I'm just going to show up and be the waiter or whatever. I would
Right.
still do all this homework.
Yeah.
Why am I working here? And you should.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
should.
You're supporting that story. Absolutely.
You're supporting the
Everything
story,
you
but
do.
it's not about you as the waiter.
Right,
It's about
right.
those two lead actors that
Exactly.
are eating. You know?
Yeah. Hangover 3 was one of my favorite. I mean, the whole franchise I loved, but when you're in Hangover 3, I mean, when you were in the room with Zach and, Bradley and Ed, I mean, just talk about that experience, because you played a great role, and it really was pivotal in the movie. I mean, that they were set free and everything like that. But talk about that and getting that role and just being in the set with those three, and how was that experience for you?
It was awesome. I mean, I was a fan of the Hangover franchise, so to come in on the third one, and it was a big deal for them when they were making the movie. It was a big deal. The third film,
Right.
coming in and knowing that my scenes were with them, and working with Todd Phillips, who I like a lot as a
Yeah.
director,
Great director. Yeah.
was for me. It's like, oh, this is gonna be fun.
Home run.
But it's one of those things again that when I was doing it, funny enough, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't nervous about doing the scene with them,
yeah. Right.
with these actors who I've known through the work, and I followed the franchise.
Right.
I wasn't nervous about doing the scene with them. I was nervous about smoking,
Oh,
because
really?
I don't smoke,
Right. I mean,
and I hate when I see an actor smoking and it doesn't look natural.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
So for me, that was something I was like,
Yeah.
all right, see, I got to be natural. I got to be natural. So
Right.
I started smoking, prepping for the role. I was smoking just to it became second nature.
Right.
So that's what I was nervous about. But again, it was a matter of they're not. You got to forget that these are huge stars that you're working
Right.
off, because if not, you're not going to get that role.
Right.
They're not looking for a character. I
Yeah.
played the chief of police in Mexico. They're not looking for a guy who's
Right.
who's excited about working with these stars. They're looking for a guy who has a status in this
Right.
scene. So I'm like, okay, who am I? You
It's
start asking
authoritative
questions.
too. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm the authority here. And
That's
what's
right.
going on here? Imagine this. What's going on here? I'm the chief of police in Mexico. And these three white guys
Yeah.
come into my town, and I welcome them.
Sure.
They can drink their beers and they can, have a great time, but don't commit a crime.
Right. Right.
So for
Not my
me, I
town.
was angry to start off.
Yeah.
And then they come in here and they're talking to me. They're talking down to me.
Yeah.
They're talking as if they're important,
Right.
which I'm the law. I have the power here to keep them in prison until they die if I
Right.
wanted.
Right.
So that's the way I played it.
Sure.
And my attitude was that.
Yeah.
And Todd Phillips, who is an amazing director, and if you've seen Joker, you know what I'm
Right.
talking
Oh,
about,
for sure. Yeah.
creates an environment where you can improvise,
Mhm.
where you can have fun, where you have space to move, where you can, and he lets you go. And He
Well, I
has
was
the
going to ask you
budget.
that because yeah, it seemed like, I mean, it was so natural the way you did your part, the way everybody else did too. And I was going to ask you if you had leeway to kind of be yourself or kind of make it your own, so to speak.
Yes, yes. I mean, we stuck by the lines, the way it was written,
Right.
but what we do with those lines, how we deliver those lines, what we do in between, how you know, my attitude that at some point I thought Bradley Cooper was paying attention to his character was paying attention to what Zach was doing, not paying attention to me.
Right.
So in one of the takes, I hit the table right in front of him. I hit the table, and
Yeah.
he jumped because he wasn't expecting that.
Right.
I
Natural
was okay
reaction.
with that. He didn't
Yeah.
care.
Right.
And these actors are fantastic.
Right.
The moment I hit the table and I got a reaction out of him, he went with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm Bradley Cooper. Who the hell is this guy who just hit the table right in front of me to get me to look at him? He went with it. He was like, yeah, no, it's not what you think. You know, he played it different.
Right.
Which is when you're working with great actors, it's like, you know, it's like boxing,
Improvise.
it's like tennis. You
Right.
hit the
Go
ball
with
that
it.
way, they're gonna hit it right back.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The back and forth. And when you get somebody who's hitting it back hard, that's what
That's
you want.
That's what
That's
you
what
want.
you want. You want to get a
Absolutely.
real reaction. You want to get and Zach did he's looking at the chart because I thought in the scene, those who haven't seen the scene, I'm
Yeah.
looking at their police record and Bradley Cooper's character and Ed Helms' characters didn't have a police record.
Sure.
Maybe a misdemeanor or something. I
Right.
forgot.
Right.
But Zach's character, it was a Bible
Yeah.
of things. And then I'm in the scene, I'm looking at it.
Right.
And I'm going, and Todd said, "Hey, take your time looking at his record."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So much
It
that
makes
you're
it
like,
funnier. Yeah, for sure.
you can't believe this. And my line is this Zach? I throw it at him. I go, is this accurate? Because I can't believe that any one person had committed that many crimes.
Yeah.
And then Zach, you didn't know what he was going to do with it, which is the
Right.
beautiful part.
Yeah.
He starts looking at it. He starts laughing at the things he's done. And
Like
his
he's
improv,
recollecting them all. Yeah.
yeah, his improv of what he's saying is his best takes are not in the movie because you can't use them. You can't use the
It would
things
have
that
to be
you say.
NC-17, right?
No, not even that.
Yeah.
Not even that. It was brilliant, funny, crazy stuff
Right.
that he did, you know.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great to see him. You know, it was great to see him. The things that he was doing, things that he didn't be like. I'm smoking. The scene I'm smoking,
Right.
and this actress Leila Lauren, who by the way went as a female police officer in Mexico, who
Right.
comes
Right.
and has a couple lines. Says, "Hey, I need to talk to you." She says
Sure.
in Spanish, "I need to talk to you. Can you come here?" And then I walk out, and that's when I walk back in, and I say, "Hey, you guys are free to go."
Are free to go.
Leila
Yeah.
went on to play the lead in Power
Yeah.
on
Wow.
the show Power.
Yep,
But she
yep.
had a couple lines in Hangover.
That's
So
great.
that's the beauty of being an actor. She had a couple lines in Hangover 3,
Yeah.
and less than a year later, she was a lead on a TV show.
Man, it helps you. And like, people that become, on a big TV show or network show or a big movie that does very well. People can get other roles from that. And, so people listening again, just make sure, you're out there auditioning for every role that you can get, small role, big role. There are no small roles, to be honest with you. The way I look at it is every role is powerful to the scene. Otherwise it wouldn't be there. So it all supports the movie. So again, just make sure you don't quit, keep auditioning, keep going hard at it. And, and just, see how many years Oscar's been at it. And, I'm sure you'll tell them that, it's hard work, but, you just keep at it and eventually you're going to make it. There's a lot of no's in this industry, but, there's going to be a lot of yeses if you stick with it. Right.
100%. 100%. Perseverance is I think that more than talent. It's more important than talent. Talent can only get you so far. I know a lot of talent who've never done anything,
right,
who quit,
right, and
who,
then they're
thought
out
their careers were pan out one way and it didn't happen in 5 years, so they just quit and went out to do something else, and they'll never know. And that was a big thing for me.
Yeah,
it was, will I be able to live happily with myself if I walked away?
Yeah,
not knowing.
Right.
Not knowing. I think that's a big thing. Regret.
Yeah.
Is a big thing that I definitely did not want to live with. I can
Yeah.
live with going for it and, doing my best for years and not making it. It'd
Yeah.
be painful.
Right.
Not working, it'd be painful. But I think it would be more painful doing something else, a job that I would be miserable at,
Yeah.
maybe making a good living or okay living.
Right.
But every time I look at a movie or I see an actor who I knew back then
Yeah.
being successful and knowing that difference between that person and me was he or she stuck around.
Right. Exactly.
I didn't want to be that person.
Right. Yeah. Well, with that being said, at your level now, I mean, being in big, high profile movies and TV shows, and, I know with actors, I mean, I've heard you talk about this on interviews as well. When you're not in a project, you're unemployed essentially as an actor. So, but all the stuff that you've been in, do you feel that, you have to be more selective of the roles that you take now, even though it might mean not making good money taking a role if you think it might hurt your career if you do take that role? Are you at that point where you have to be selective in what you take? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I have been for a while, even possibly when I wasn't at that point.
Yeah.
Um, I I I I don't really want to play the character that I don't really want to play.
Right.
And if that character doesn't speak to me, if that character, and I understand having to pay the bills,
Yeah.
so that makes sense. And I've been there many times,
Sure.
And then I see, can I play this character? Can I find something interesting for me to do with this character? Is there anything that I can bring to it? All those are questions that I ask. Or am I working with a director that I really want to work with?
Right.
Or is this a project that I want to be a part of?
Yeah.
And then that I can get behind.
Right.
And it's a good thing that they're paying,
Yeah.
So you ask questions, and if the question is no, the answer is no to all those questions that I've asked, then I'm not doing it because I want to have a career.
Right.
It's not only this job, it's the longevity of being around. And, if you do crappy jobs,
Right.
Then you start being seen as an actor who does crappy stuff.
Well, and it doesn't go away. It's always there for historic purposes. It's people can
Especially
throw it,
now.
Anytime they want, they can watch it. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially
Good.
now.
Before we go, there's just two more questions I have, but the one is advice for our listeners, which are mostly artists themselves. And, in your long career, your successful career, what can you give them as far as advice goes for somebody just getting started, maybe just, got out of college or out of high school and they want to get into the business?
That this is a great time when it comes on. We spoke a little bit earlier about this. It's a great time if you're starting out as opposed to the past, meaning you have the internet. You have a phone that can record on 4K. Go ahead and write your stories, write little monologues, put them out there. You can follow on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok people who you admire, who you like. Be respectful if you approach them. Don't be pushy. Don't be needy, because people don't like that. It's not going to help you at all. But be proactive. Be proactive. Don't wait for somebody to give you a job. Create work for yourself.
Yeah.
Create work for yourself. And that's what I try to do. You said before that I produce and direct. That's one of the reasons why I started directing and producing and writing, because I wanted longevity. And I see if I direct something, if I create projects, then I can give myself work if I want to, or just direct. I love directing. It's super creative,
Right.
And that's why I started doing it. And if you're an artist, I think of myself as an artist. I don't even anymore go, oh, I'm an actor. No, I'm an artist. I'm a storyteller.
Right.
I tell stories by acting. I tell stories by directing. I tell stories by writing. And that's what I try to focus on. That's what I do when I'm not acting in front of the camera. I'm looking for projects. I'm creating. I'm networking. But it's always great. A Summer Night, the film that I feature that I did with my wife.
Yeah, I see the poster.
I wrote and directed.
Well. Yeah.
So, it's behind me. That's
you.
right.
There it is.
That's right. that we're in the process of getting distribution for it.
That's
A
great.
feature film that I wrote and we shot it during COVID because we're sitting around.
Right.
We were sitting around, we were going nuts, and I go, we got to do something.
Got
I
to
got
be
to come up with
creative.
something.
Absolutely.
And then this idea came to me.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, what a gift. And suddenly, at the worst time possible, I was excited about something I was creating. I was back in my element there.
Sure.
Planning.
Right.
Instead of sitting with my arms crossed, all depressed that we all were
Right.
for many different reasons. We all lost loved ones and all that.
Right.
So that's what I would say to any young person starting in the business. You have a story to tell. Why is it that you want to be an actor? And your want has to be stronger, by the way. Just like any choice you make as an actor with the character, the person who wants to start acting, who wants to go into this, it's a very competitive, very difficult industry.
Yeah.
Very difficult. So the reason for going into it has to be a legit reason, meaning this is something you really want to do. You want to play these roles. You want to tell stories. You're a storyteller. You're passionate about this, and you can't see yourself doing anything else.
Yeah.
You might have other jobs to survive and all that, or have a second career, which is great, that pays your bills. Hey, man, that's awesome if you can do that.
Yeah.
But pursuing the acting or directing or writing, you can't see yourself doing anything else. This is what makes you feel alive. That's a good reason. If your reason for this to be rich, to be famous, then you might as well play the lottery.
Yeah.
Because the most important thing is not there, which is the passion for what you're doing.
For creating.
But you might have, you might have the know-how, how to, the business side of it and this and that, which is very important, by the way.
Right.
It's called show business.
Yep.
But you also have to have the artistry, the craft, constantly working your craft, improving, getting better.
Yeah.
Because the competition is certainly doing it.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. It's not getting harder, not easier. So
yeah, it is.
Yeah. And, but before we go, I just want to ask you this question. When it's all said and done, Oscar, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave behind when people think of Oscar Torre?
That the characters I played, that the films I made, touched their lives, had a message, spoke to them, they identified with. Every time I've directed two feature films and a few short films. And I always say the same thing. I tell the cast, I tell this, if what we're doing touches one person, makes them think, they identify with it, makes a difference in their life. One person, I've done my job.
Yeah.
If I was able to reach one person, then I'm happy. And at the end of the day, when I pass away, if I leave that behind of somebody, life is better because they saw my character making mistakes that they shouldn't make.
Yeah.
Or saw a woman, who was a stripper, and saw her as a person and not as what you think of stereotype that you might have. But you see, this is a person who's fighting for something and struggling, and it might not be who you think she is. And you identify with it, or if that's what you do for a living. You're a dancer.
Right. And
you identify with her, with Summer, and you go, wow, that's what she did. Well, that's how she did it. Or, she's able to do this. She's able to be sober.
Yeah.
And still dance. Or she's in a 12-step program.
Right.
I'm going to get sober.
Yeah.
And make it that woman, that person. And because of that, their kids' lives are better. I mean, we have no idea. When we play a role, we play it honestly, and we give it our all. What difference is going to make? I heard somebody say, an acting teacher, I never studied with, but I heard it say my wife to study with this person. And he said, for us, it might just be doctoring on a show. But if you play that, if you give it your all, and you make that doctor the best doctor you could possibly make it for her, and one little kid is sitting at home, and he's watching you, or she's watching you, be that doctor. And that kid has this thought of like, not, I want to be an actor. They say, I want to be a doctor. and that kid grows up to cure some illness.
Yeah.
Think about where that started. It
Right.
started by watching an actor playing a doctor
Yep.
on TV.
Powerful.
So
Yeah.
that's what I think whenever I play a role.
Yeah.
And what I'd like my legacy to be.
I love that. That's great. Oh my God. Anyway, Oscar, what an honor to have you on. Thank you for taking the time to be on the Stage Door Show. I can't thank you enough, and always welcome back, of course. And just wish you nothing but success to you and your wife, Judy, which we interviewed recently. So thank you again, Oscar, and just have a great night. And thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure.